How much is too much? The age-old question that can apply to all sorts of things. How much time can you tolerate spending with your least favorite relatives? How many licks it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop before you just say screw it and start biting that sucker? How much cheese you like on your pizza? Or how much some jackwagon on eBay is trying to charge over the asking price for Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Now, when it comes to buying video games, some people, sure, they have the mindset of just, hey, if I gotta have this game, then I gotta have this game, even if that means spending a lot of money for it. But for a lot of you, I've noticed people will say, this amount of money I will not go past when it comes to buying a video game because no game is worth more than that. Naturally, what that amount is will vary from person to person, but one of the numbers I've seen floated around quite a bit is $100. Now, maybe that seems high to you, maybe that seems low to you, I don't know. But I think the reason why so many people say $100 is because that's when you get into triple digits. And I think for some people, it's just like, whoa, once we get into triple digits, what are we doing here? I think the magical nature of the number 100 being a big number is something that's ingrained in a lot of us from early childhood. I mean, I can't speak for a lot of you, but for me and a lot of the kids I grew up around, being able to count to 100 was one of those big, like, cool kind of things you could do. Pooping without any help was a big one too, and if you were a real whiz kid, you'd be counting to 100 while you were pooping without any help. Now, let's say that $100 is the most you'll pay for a game, or some other number, whatever number that may be. Even with that in mind, there might still be some exceptions you make to your own rule, and one of the biggest examples that I can think of is games that are personal to you. Now, luckily, if a game is personal to you, then odds are it's probably a game you've had already for a very long time. But if for some reason you didn't have it and it was an expensive game, well, let's just say there's some games that are personal to me that I'm glad I'm not faced with that decision, because who knows what kind of prices I could be driven to pay for some games. Something else that can affect your price threshold is which console you're collecting for. So let's say you're gonna collect for the Neo Geo and you say to yourself, all right, I'm collecting for the Neo Geo and I will not pay more than $15 for a game. Well, then it looks like you're probably not collecting for the Neo Geo. There's certain consoles where if you want to collect for them, you just gotta be willing to pay more. But on the flip side, there's some consoles that, because they are expensive, they make you say, all right, well, all those games go past my price threshold, so forget it. I'm just gonna not collect that console. And especially with something like the Neo Geo, there's plenty of other ways you can play those games. Okay, and then what about games that you find selling for way below their normal going rate, where even if it's maybe still expensive, you think, I'm probably not gonna find this game again for anywhere near that cheap. For example, let's say a game normally costs $300 and you find it for $90 and you're like, ooh, you know, I normally don't like to spend $90 on a video game, but that is just such a deal. And then you're thinking about, like, do I really even like this game? Well, maybe I would like this game. I could try it. I don't know. I've also noticed that sometimes people will make an exception for games that are known as being expensive games, where they're like, all right, you know, I normally don't spend this much, but this is just how it goes for a game like this. It's been expensive for so long, and I'm gonna make this one-time kind of weird exception just for this game because I really want it. And then on the flip side, something I've noticed is that when games have a reputation for not being expensive for a really long time, and then all of a sudden they do get expensive, people are just like, geez, this sucks. I just cannot get myself to pay that much for this game because I'm so used to it being way cheaper. One game that pops into my head when I think of this is Castlevania Symphony of the Night. that was a $30 game for so long. And then all of a sudden it just shot way up. I've got to imagine for anybody who had always kind of considered getting it but not, seeing the price now is probably just really devastating to think about. You'll also see people getting used to paying low prices for certain consoles. For example, the Game Boy. Now, most of the best games for the Game Boy you can get for 10 or 20 bucks, something around there, to the point where if you see a game that goes for, say, goodness forbid, $30 or $40, you think, my gosh, what kind of madness is this? I'm not paying that for a Game Boy game. Plus, one of the biggest reasons why you can get away with having a price threshold is because for almost any really expensive game you can think of, there's a cheaper alternative that can likely scratch that itch you're having. And it may be a game that's not even that similar to the game you were craving initially. For example, one day I was craving Little Samson for NES, but more specifically, just a creative 2D NES side-scrolling action platformer type of game. So what I ended up deciding on was getting Batman for NES, and it more than scratched that itch. It was like a full-on back massage. Hey, there's a business idea. Batman's back massages. You just dress up as Batman and give back massages. What's not to trust there? But even if I was determined to play Little Samson specifically, yeah, there's ways to do it. And really, I think what it ultimately comes down to is how determined are you to own a original physical copy of a game, because if you just want to play it, yeah, there's other ways to do it. But on the flip side, we love video games. That's what we do. And so for some of you, even a large amount of money can't compare to the amount of joy and satisfaction you get from having a certain game, and therefore it's worth it to you. I've also noticed that people's standards can change over time as things change. In fact, quick little story for you. So I buy my bananas from the grocery store and they're 19 cents a nanner. Then, all of a sudden, one day, they introduce what I can only refer to as mega nanners, which are still just 19 cents a nanner. So now, every time I go to the grocery store, sure, I'll buy regular bananas, absolutely, but I'm looking for those mega nanners every time. Now, while nanners to mega nanners is a more positive trend, unfortunately, game prices getting higher over time is a more negative trend, and some people may have had to adjust their expectations. But with that said, for those willing to share, I'd be curious what some of your price thresholds are. How much is too much to pay for a game? So for those answers and anything else you'd like to say, leave a comment down below and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the retro bird, yeah, and he's talking about video games.